Okay, so let's talk a little bit about survival strategies or acquisitional strategies that social animals have. Roughly, these can be broken down into three groups. And of course, these align on a spectrum again. So graceful failure becomes a technique to assess where the spectrum is. And you can actually find evidence of this in ape studies as well. The first way that we can move the world is physically. We can pick up and move stuff. We can move dirt into a road. It's physical coercion. So when we say coercion, that's a value neutral term. It's not to say that you're forcing or dominating other people. It's that you're literally physically coercing something. You're moving it physically. So the first way that we can manipulate the world is physical. Then as social animals, the next way we can affect the world is social, through bonding, through cooperation, through relationships. And then the last way that we can move the world is through information. Now you can see that these three, they traverse three different layers of sophistication or complexity. So it's not to say that an informational system will replace a physical way of moving the world. It's to say that you can manipulate information in such a way to move the world better, or to get other people to move the world. So you can combine an informational system with a social system. So you find in ape studies, you can have the tyrannical ape that is physically threatening troop members. So it's just pure might. And this is a sort of stereotypical notion of an alpha male or whatever, that it's the most dominant, the most aggressive, the most violent is the one that ends up ruling. And in that circumstance, what generally happens is that a gang of other lesser apes, they call them beta apes, will pool their resources and overthrow the tyrant. So we see that in nature. What they're using in that particular case is bonding. So you could say that these two map over predation and cooperation. You'll also find in ape studies where you'll have a smaller ape that doesn't have the physical stature, but is a little bit brighter than the rest of them. And he'll use informational or signaling as a way of maintaining control over his troop. So he'll bang gas cans together to make loud noises to scare away the bigger apes. So these three domains are sort of the domains in which humans or any social animal can get things done. And then specifically, that's to gain stuff that we need or want at a lower cost than the benefits that we get from gaining it. So we'll break those out into that it's physical, bonding, and signaling. The other way of looking at it is through predation, symbiosis, and parasitism, and you'll see that there's overlap there. The predation is equivalent to physical coercion. So it's high risk, low cost, low time horizon, meaning short-sighted, means of acquiring immediate benefits. So you take on the risk of injury to kill another animal to get the benefits of that animal immediately. That would be equivalent to the physical tyrannical troop leader, a predatory strategy. Then when we look at the sort of band of brothers, the group that comes together would be equivalent to cooperation or symbiosis. They're sharing costs, they're distributing power, they're self-policing in a way to maintain group cohesion. So the group as a whole can move the world. So they're influencing or manipulating through bonding. To put that into human terms, you could say that it's through trade and negotiation. And then you'll see how reciprocity overlaps on cooperation. The cooperation is sustainable when it's reciprocal. So we call cooperation trade. The last one, signaling, in a value neutral sense, is just an informational means of coercing the world. But if we put it into sort of the litmus of cooperation being the most preferable. Informational would overlap onto parasitism. It may not sound clear at first, but think of it this way, that if you have a tapeworm, that tapeworm needs to accommodate your defense systems, your immunity. It can't be so active as to be triggering a defense mechanism within the body, because if it did, your body would kill it off. So there's a certain degree or a certain element of information play, even on a biological level, when we talk about parasites. Okay, so those three means: predation, symbiosis, parasitism, and how they overlap over systems of complexity. The very base level, the de facto level, you have predation. We move the world physically. Then when we come together, we're at a social or informal institutional level where we work together. We bond to some degree. Now, what that means to move from predation into cooperation, that means that you have to sort of give the other one the opportunity to some degree to predate. That doesn't mean that you're encouraging it. It means that for you to cooperate, you're going to suspend your defenses. You're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, knowing to some degree at any moment they can revert back to predation. That means that cooperation requires a certain degree of trust. The trust needs to be in place or needs to be maintained for cooperation to be the means of coercing the world. So once we're at that social level where there's a certain degree of trust has been established so that disparate parties can be cooperating together to seek to reach their aims, that trust then opens up a new opportunity, and that's the betrayal of trust, but not to the degree that it would spark defenses. Okay, so this is sort of treading the fine line of taking liberties or pushing limits with others so that you could free ride, so that you can gain benefits off of their incurred costs. So they're paying the costs for your benefits. So that means you kind of got to manipulate the information space a little bit. You have to be deceptive, right? So for parasitism to work, there has to be trust in place, and then there has to be this manipulation of information. Okay, so these are the three means that that we coerce the world. The first one's only successful if you have physical strength. The second one is only successful if there's some degree of trust, trust in place, and a means of maintaining that trust. And then the last one, parasitism, ends up being a betrayal of that trust. Okay, so this will become important in the next few concepts that we cover.